So let's start off, Diane, about talking about the Michigan Capital Network. I always assume on the show that people don't know anything about the guests or the organizations. And if they do, well, then maybe they only know a little bit. So fill us in.
Okay, yes. Well, thank you for having me on, Mike. I'm excited to be reconnected with you after all these years. And it's hard to believe it's been a quarter of a century. That's kind of scary.
But where did the time go, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So sometimes people do get confused, as you said, about angel investing versus venture capital investing. And I want to make the point that angel investors invest their own money. So they're making their own personal decision on an investment in an early stage company. And venture capitalists typically are managing other people's money. They have formed a fund, and they are professional investors that are investing that fund on behalf of the limited partners that invested in the fund. So there's a big difference, and there's also a difference in the types of companies that the different types of organizations invest in. Angel investors are the ones that will look at the earlier stage companies. They're investing their own money, so they can look at things that just are exciting for them, and maybe in a field that they're interested in or they know a lot about, or they just find something that's really intriguing. Some of our angel investors are very interested in the economic development side of angel investing. They're really looking at opportunities to invest in companies in their area, their region, their industry, that type of thing. So with that said, we've got a great angel community in Michigan. And I'm very thrilled that we have 3 other angel group directors that will be on board with us here today to talk about what their groups do, because each group is a little different. Sometimes they're focused on their region. Sometimes they're focused on particular types of technologies. And in the case of Marlowe's organization, Commune Angels, they're really focused on the entrepreneurs that are developing these businesses. They want to specifically support women founded businesses, and also businesses that are founded by minority entrepreneurs. So there's a different flavor to each one. And Michigan Capital Network, the organization I'm with, we run multiple angel groups. So we have Blue Water Angels in mid-Michigan. We have Grand Angels in Grand Rapids, Kazoo Angels in Kalamazoo, and Woodward Angels in Detroit. And we have grown out of Grand Angels. That was our founding organization. And it is arguably the longest standing, most prolific and stable angel group we've had in the state, and it's 20 years old. Most of the groups are a little younger than that. Although Blue Water Angels that came into our network last year is also a group that's been around for quite a while in mid-Michigan. And like most angel groups, Grand Angels really started with a focus on what's happening in the Grand Rapids area. What are those opportunities to invest in early stage companies? And Blue Water Angels was the same way. Ken Kuski was the driving force, and he wanted to really do things that would really help promote business development in the mid-Michigan area. So those groups were kind of focused in that way. I would say now our MCN Association angel groups are a little bit broader in their perspective, and they really are investing in companies that are really anywhere in the country, but mostly focused on those in Michigan, in part because with early stage companies, the investment amounts are typically lower than they would be with venture capital investing. And the cost to do due diligence on a really early stage company that's not local to you can be too high for us. And we don't have the capacity to do that. Our angel track, our pipeline of angel investments is really managed by our members and not the Michigan Capital Network Ventures team, which runs our venture fund. So because it's member driven, we really want to invest in companies that we can see and meet and visit and really get to know. So although we're not focused on just a metropolitan area, we do like to look at companies primarily in Michigan.
So Michigan Capital Network has raised 4 funds. Why don't we talk about that?
Okay, sure. Yes, we are on Fund 4. It's a $40 million fund. We closed on it earlier this year, although we did a soft close on it last year. So we did start investing out of Fund 4 last year. It's significantly larger than the funds that we've had in the past. Our Fund 3 was $12.5 million. So we really see this as quite a leap in growth for us, and it allows us to invest in companies that are a little bit farther along. The fund invests in companies that have, for the most part, they have revenue, they have their management team in place, the founders are working there full time, they have customers. There's a lot more due diligence we can do on companies like that, because we can look at how their product market fit is turning out. We can see if their financial projections are on track, things that you can't do with very early stage companies that maybe are pre-revenue and they're making a lot of assumptions about how their product will fit the market. So the fund is really essentially a venture capital fund. There are limited partners in the fund, there's institutional investors in the fund, and we have a professional staff that makes the investment decisions. So we really run 2 parallel tracks. We have our pipeline for fund deals, and we have a pipeline for our what we call our angel only deals, which are the earlier stage companies.
Yeah, when I came back to Michigan from the West Coast, I was working out in Seattle for 7 years, and before that, 3 years in California. It's a whole different environment out there. Of course, how do you compete with California, right? And even Seattle, for that matter. Back then you didn't have the Amazons, but you sure had Microsoft and Boeing and some of the other major players. And I think in the beginning, when Matt and I have talked about this several times, and there was like 3 or 4, if that, maybe angel groups in the state. And now I think we're up around 30 or 40. I know they're not all in your group, but totally, I think very large. And again, the same thing with the venture capital crowd. Typically, my understanding and the way I always explain it is angel groups for around 250,000 typically for a deal, more or less. They may share that deal with several other angel groups to minimize risk. Whereas when you get into the venture capital world, you're talking millions of dollars, and there's a high probability that they're going to take ownership of your company. I mean, I haven't seen very many deals with VCs where they didn't at least have a majority stake. So we got about 4 minutes left in your segment. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Well, I think that's a bit of a misconception that a lot of people have about bringing on institutional investors, that they take over your company or they own the majority of your company. And that's not necessarily true. And it's certainly not true in the early stages of investing in companies. And the numbers have really kind of grown. I think we used to use sort of the rule of thumb that an angel deal was like 250,000, but we're seeing really most of the deals are looking for $1 or $2 million,
Really?
which means that our groups really have to collaborate with each other and kind of look at these deals together, which we do. We actually all meet on a phone call once a month and put our heads together on the deal flow that we're looking at. And for anyone interested that's hearing this, there is the Michigan Angel Summit coming up on September 18th in Ann Arbor. It's a day-long program. So if anyone's curious about how all this works, that would be a really good place to stop in and learn about angel investing and how we work together. And it takes a village to raise an entrepreneur, and it definitely takes a village to fund an entrepreneur. So we really do coordinate our efforts. And when we see good opportunities and just high potential companies that are in Michigan, we all want to support them. So it's, and we need to, because if they're looking for $1 million or $2 million, we need several groups to be
Yes.
jumping on board and supporting them.